The emerging technologies has been the heart and one of the drivers of security and arms control. Technology advances have always been rooted in what we understand about security concerns, been driven by security and arms control. What's perhaps different today is the pace, the complexity, and the fact that the range of actors involved in technology developments. So whereas before the state and possibly perhaps often the military capacities and institutions of the state drove technological developments, now we're seeing a whole set of actors that are non-state actors, private sector actors and other actors. And that identifying how we think about regulation and identifying who should be involved in regulation has become much more complex. I think we need a little bit more dialogue and debate as to what we think those risks are. I think at the moment there's a lot of hyperbole and there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of scenario development, but not all of them are grounded in technical or political realities. So I think the first is we need to bring the debate to a little bit more of a practical issue of what are we looking at and what are the risks, and do a better job of defining what we think those risks are. And it seems to me that some of those risks are around predictability. They're about understanding and explicability of the use of technology, of the way technologies function. And then how we might, once we have identified what we think those risks are, who can be around the table? How can we broaden that conversation to include private sector, to include non-state actors, to include communities? It seems to me that thinking about addressing those risks means opening up what we understand to be the institutions of security and the institutions of arms control. I think that's also a challenge because there's no one centre of authority or no one centre of governance, and in this more decentralised space, how do we think about it? So I would first say we need multiple dialogues at multiple levels. At the global level, there is the multilateral bodies stand at the heart of trying to open up and facilitating that dialogue. I think we need to think about more regional dialogues, regional organisations, regional institutions, actors. And I think then within the national space, how do we open up that dialogue that is both within government but also outside and bringing in universities, institutions, think tanks. So I don't see any one centre, but I do see processes of international, regional and national happening at different levels and in parallel processes. So I think it's important to remember two big features about the United Nations. First, it is a forum in which all member states can participate and engage. So it aims to be an inclusive space and an inclusive intergovernmental institution. And increasingly, I think the United Nations seeks to bring other actors, including non-state actors, into some of those discussions and dialogues and processes. So inclusivity is where the UN, I think, has a big role. A second is that the United Nations is a normative body. It is a body that reflects values and standards that member states have agreed. And those include issues around equity, issues around human rights. And that value-based discussion is critical for us to think about how we identify risks and manage risks that new technologies can potentially pose, and to reap the benefits, because I think it's important that we also look at the benefits that they pose for humanity. So there's an inclusivity dimension and there is a value dimension that I think the United Nations has to pose. The Secretary General in May of this year launched his agenda for disarmament, and in that he calls for inclusive dialogue between a much broader set of actors and dialogue. He's called for responsible innovation on the part of the private sector and how to engage with the scientific and expert community as well as the commercial actors in discussions of how we maximize the benefits and minimize the risks posed by new technologies.